Have you ever stopped to think about why certain ideas never cross your mind? Why some questions simply don't arise, even when they seem obvious? The answer might be more disturbing than we imagine. We live in an invisible cage, built not with iron bars, but with words, habits, and beliefs that have shaped our minds since childhood. This cage didn't emerge by accident. It's the result of a refined system of human domestication, so subtle that most people don't even notice its existence. Like animals raised in captivity, we've lost the ability to question the limits of our own prison. We accept as natural what is merely convenient for those who control us. The most frightening thing is realizing that we ourselves have become the guardians of this prison. We police our own thoughts, censor our most authentic ideas, and punish any impulse of real freedom. It's time to see the invisible bars that surround us. From early on, we hear that school is the place where we're going to become somebody in life. But do we really become somebody? Or do we just learn to be nobody in an organized way? The educational system, as we know it, wasn't designed to form free thinkers. It was designed to produce obedient workers, predictable consumers, and citizens who don't ask too many questions. The logic is simple. We enter school full of curiosity, asking 1,000 questions a day. We leave at 18 knowing exactly what we should think about every important subject. We learn that there's always a right answer, and that our function is to memorize it, not create it. Anyone who dares to disagree with the official answer key is punished with low grades and disapproving looks. Gradually, our capacity to think for ourselves gets anesthetized. George Orwell described this process perfectly. The system doesn't need to prohibit free thought. It just needs to make it unnecessary. Why question when we already have all the answers ready? Why create when there's already an approved model? School teaches that thinking outside the box is risky, unproductive, and fundamentally a waste of time. We leave there not as educated human beings, but as products ready for the job market. Words are the tools of thought. Whoever controls vocabulary also controls the limits of what you're capable of thinking. This isn't conspiracy theory. It's a reality as old as civilization itself. Orwell called this newspeak, the creation of an impoverished language where certain ideas cannot be expressed simply because the words to describe them don't exist. Today, we live a more subtle version of this. It's not the government removing words from the dictionary. It's society itself gradually stopping using them. When was the last time you heard someone talk about contemplation, transcendence, or self-sufficiency? As these words disappear from common vocabulary, the realities they represented also disappear. In their place, we adopt an increasingly technical, impersonal, and utilitarian language. We talk about human resources instead of people, consumers instead of citizens, content instead of knowledge. Each of these substitutions is a small death of our humanity. When we call workers human capital, we're literally transforming people into objects. And our minds accept this transformation as something natural. The most dangerous thing is that this impoverishment of language happens slowly. A generation grows up already without certain words, so they don't even miss them. For someone who's never heard the word sovereignty used in daily life, the concept of individual autonomy becomes nebulous, almost impossible to imagine. It's like trying to explain colors to someone born blind. Without the right vocabulary, certain realities simply don't exist. Thus, our mental prison gets built brick by brick, word by word. Each term that disappears is a door that closes, a possibility of thought that gets erased. In the end, we're left with vocabulary so limited that we can only think within previously established tracks. Our language becomes a straitjacket for our mind. Is there anything more tyrannical than mandatory virtue? We live in an era where being good has become a public performance, a theatre where everyone knows the script and no one dares to improvise. Nietzsche called this herd morality, a system where right and wrong don't come from deep reflection, but from the superficial consensus of the majority. See how it works. For every controversial subject, there's always an opinion considered correct. Anyone who disagrees isn't just seen as mistaken. They're treated as morally inferior. It's not enough to be wrong. You're a bad person for thinking differently. This logic transforms discussions into moral tribunals, where the goal isn't to discover truth, but to prove that you're on the right side of history. The most unsettling thing is that this herd morality completely dispenses with individual thought. You don't need to understand an issue deeply to have an opinion. You just need to figure out what opinion is accepted by your group and adopt it. It's easier, safer, and guarantees your acceptance in the tribe. This kind of virtue under pressure generates something distorted. People who seem good out of fear, not conviction. They're just because they fear being cancelled, generous because they expect applause, tolerant because intolerance became a social sin. But is goodness out of fear really goodness? Is justice without authenticity really protecting anyone? The result is a society full of virtuous people who never seriously reflected on what it means to be virtuous. People who know exactly how to appear ethical, but never develop their own moral compass. They're actors playing the role of conscious citizens, but behind the mask, consciousness remains asleep. Why are we so afraid of being alone? Not physically alone. Everyone has felt that. I'm talking about the fear of being alone with your own thoughts, of not having constant validation from the group, of needing to make decisions without consulting the herd. This fear is one of the most powerful tools of social control ever created. The experiments conducted by Solomon Asch in the 1950s revealed something deeply disturbing about human nature. Even when we're certain of what we see, we change our opinion if everyone around us says the opposite. People who clearly saw that one line was longer than another began to doubt their own eyes when the group claimed the opposite. The fear of being isolated was greater than confidence in their own perception. Stanley Milgram took this question even further. His experiment showed that ordinary people were capable of applying painful electric shocks to others, simply because an authority figure said it was necessary, and because they didn't want to be seen as disobedient. The fear of contradicting social expectations can lead us to do things we would never do if we were truly alone with our own conscience. This terror of ideological solitude is systematically exploited. We live in a world where being out of the conversation is considered a social failure, where not having an opinion about everything is confused with ignorance. We're bombarded with messages saying we need to keep up with the debate, stay informed, be part of the discussion. Anyone who dares to say, "I don't have a formed opinion on this," or "I prefer not to take a position," is quickly labeled as indifferent, cowardly, or alienated. But the system needs you to fear mental solitude, because people who feel comfortable with themselves are almost impossible to control. Those who don't depend on constant approval from others can think for themselves, reach inconvenient conclusions, and live according to internal rules. That's why solitude is portrayed as something scary, when in truth, it can be the greatest source of freedom that exists. The most effective control is the one you apply to yourself. There's no need for a policeman at your door when you already carry one inside your head. Orwell called this the thought police, but reality is even more subtle. External censorship isn't necessary when everyone becomes their own big brother. See how this happens in practice. You have an idea that escapes what's considered acceptable, and immediately an internal voice whispers, "That's not politically correct. People will judge you. That could look bad." You haven't even expressed the idea. You're already self-censoring. The control system has been so well installed that now it operates automatically, without needing supervision. And that inner voice isn't really yours. It's the echo of 1,000 external voices, from the teacher who said certain questions were inappropriate, from parents who taught that certain things aren't spoken, from media that constantly repeats what's allowed to think. This voice has been repeated so many times that it started to sound like your own conscience. The most perverse thing is that this self-censorship is sold as personal evolution. I learned to police myself. Now I have more filter. I'm more conscious of what I say. Oh, but is developing filters really evolution? Or just an elegant form of mental mutilation? When we censor our own thoughts, we're not getting wiser. We're just getting more domesticated. The result is a society full of people in internal conflict, divided between what they really think and what they believe they should think. This constant division generates anxiety, confusion, and a persistent feeling that something is wrong, even without knowing exactly what. We live as foreigners inside our own minds, always distrusting our most authentic impulses. We've created a culture that confuses submission with responsibility. The good employee is one who never questions orders. The good citizen is one who follows all rules without complaining. The good consumer is one who buys what they're told without asking questions. Obedience has been rebranded as virtue, and no one noticed the switch. This inversion of values is brilliant in its perversity. Those who obey blindly are praised as collaborative, adaptable, professional. Those who question are labeled as problematic, difficult to deal with, not team player material. Thus, society rewards exactly the behaviors that ensure everything continues functioning like a predictable machine, where each human being becomes just another cog. The so-called meritocracy is one of the most sophisticated faces of this conditioning. It teaches that those who stand out are those who best adapt to the rules, not those who question whether these rules make sense. Success is measured by the ability to maximize your performance within an already established game, not by the courage to propose a new game. Observe how this starts early. In school, the ideal student is one who delivers everything on time, sits quietly, and repeats exactly what was taught. At work, the exemplary employee is one who hits targets, avoids conflicts, and accepts demands without questioning. In society, the model citizen is one who pays taxes, obeys laws, and doesn't bother anyone. This culture of rewarded obedience creates a dangerous illusion, the idea that submission is competence. Truly intelligent and creative people are often seen as inadequate, while mediocre but obedient individuals are promoted to leadership positions. The result? A world commanded by people who know how to follow orders, but don't know how to think for themselves. And when these people reach power, they just replicate the same system that shaped them. One of the most effective forms of control is convincing someone that they are something defined, and that because they are that, they must act in a certain way. From early on, we're bombarded with identity labels: man or woman, middle class or poor, young or old, technical or creative. Each label comes with an invisible manual about how to think, what to want, and how to behave. These identities function as small mental cages. If you strongly identify with a role, like entrepreneur, artist, family man, successful professional, you probably also adopted, without realizing it, certain behaviors, opinions, and lifestyles that come in the package. And not always because you chose, but because it was expected. These identities function as invisible cages. When you strongly identify with a label, like entrepreneur, activist, liberal professional, you often end up adopting political positions, consumption habits, and life expectations that came along with that package, not because you reflected deeply on these choices, but because they were already included in the identity you adopted. The most revealing thing is observing how these identities are manufactured and sold. The marketing industry discovered that it's much easier to sell a product when you first sell an identity. They don't just sell sneakers, they sell the lifestyle of urban athlete. They don't just sell a car, they sell the status of independent winner. You don't buy objects, you buy versions of yourself. This identity fragmentation has a high cost for the human psyche. Instead of seeing yourself as a complex being in constant transformation, a person reduces themselves to a list of social labels. I'm a woman, progressive, vegan, businesswoman, mother, as if the richness of human experience could be reduced to a sequence of fixed categories. And what happens when someone tries to leave these boxes? Identity crisis comes. If I'm not this, then what am I? This question alone reveals the trap. We assume we have to be something defined, when perhaps true freedom lies precisely in not needing to fit into anything, remaining open, being indefinable. But that requires courage, The courage to exist without guarantees, without labels, without the comfort of a tribe. Modern entertainment is one of the most effective tools of social control ever invented. Unlike traditional censorship, which provokes resistance, entertainment conquers us with pleasure. It distracts while promising freedom. It numbs while promising connection. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Orwell imagined a future where information would be rigidly controlled by the government. But Aldous Huxley was even more accurate. He predicted a society where people would be so entertained that they would simply stop caring about truth. And that's what we see today. We don't need to burn books. We just need to make them irrelevant in the face of the bombardment of stimuli that capture our attention 24 hours a day. See how this machine operates. Addictive series that don't transform. Games that challenge without educating. Social networks that connect without bringing closer. We spend hours immersed in content that leaves us simultaneously stimulated and empty, busy and unproductive. Being entertained has become the new normal, even when it means not really living. The most cruel thing is that this constant distraction is presented as freedom. Now you can watch whatever you want, whenever you want. There's content for all tastes. You're free to choose. But is it really freedom? Or just a prison with more channel options? Choosing between 1,000 forms of distraction isn't the same as being free. Real freedom requires consciousness, and entertainment distances us from it. This avalanche of stimuli serves a very specific role, keeping us too busy to reflect on what really matters. After a full day at a soulless job, all we want is to forget, disconnect, escape, and industrial entertainment offers us exactly that. Temporary forgetfulness of our own existence. We live in the era of abundant choice, or at least that's what they tell us. We can choose between hundreds of laundry detergent brands, dozens of political parties, thousands of online content pieces. This creates the powerful illusion that freedom is having options. But what if the very abundance of choices is a refined form of control? Byung-Chul Han observed precisely. Modern power no longer works by saying you can't do this, but rather you can do anything, as long as you remain within the invisible limits of the system. It's like offering 1,000 ice cream flavors to someone who might just be thirsty for water. Look at the political field. We can vote for different candidates, but they all operate within the same economic system, follow the same market logic, offer variations of the same model. The choice is real, but superficial. It's like choosing between soda brands when what you need is something that truly quenches your thirst. In consumption, this is even more evident. Supermarkets with 50,000 products give us the sensation of total control over our lives. But almost everything is manufactured by a handful of large corporations, following the same standards and trapping us in the same cycle. Work to consume, consume to keep working. Abundance, in this case, is just a well-constructed illusion. The most perverse thing is that this false freedom still makes us blame ourselves for our frustrations. If you're unhappy, it's because you chose wrong. If you didn't achieve success, it's because you didn't try hard enough. The system transfers all responsibility to the individual, even when all options are limited and programmed to keep everything as it is. In the end, we become prisoners who feel guilty for not being able to escape from a cell they don't even know exists. The internet promised to be the great space of freedom, where all ideas would circulate freely and all voices could be heard. In part, this promise was fulfilled. We've never had so much access to information. But something unexpected happened. The more content we consume, the narrower our worldview becomes. The algorithms that control our social networks and search engines were programmed to offer us more of the same. More of what we like, more of what we already think, more of what we want to hear. It's like living inside a digital mirror, where everything we see is an amplified version of what we already are. This algorithmic curation is more efficient than any state censorship. No one prohibits you from accessing different ideas. They simply don't appear. They're not in your feed, don't appear in search results, aren't recommended by the system. To find them, conscious effort is required. And how many people really make that effort? The result? Increasingly solid information bubbles, entire groups living in parallel realities, with completely distinct versions of the same facts, creating their own dogmas, absolute certainties, and unquestionable taboos. The internet, which should connect, ended up fragmenting. It transformed the world into an ideological patchwork quilt, where each tribe lives at war with the other. And this division is extremely profitable. The more polarized we are, the more time we spend online, the more ads we see, the more data we produce. Algorithms discovered that hatred and indignation generate more clicks than calm reflection or honest dialogue. Thus, we're led to extremes, not because we're naturally radical, but because extremism pays. The system doesn't fear rebellion, it absorbs it, packages it, and sells it back as a product. The genius of modern control lies precisely in this, transforming even resistance into just another form of obedience. We live in an era where being rebellious became a trademark, contesting became a lifestyle, and revolution transformed into a market niche. See how this works. Each generation receives its controlled dose of rebel symbols. In the 60s, it was the hippies. In the 80s, the punks. In the 90s, the rappers. Today, it's the subversive influencers who criticize the system while feeding it with daily content. Each protest movement is quickly captured, diluted, and transformed into a cultural product. The entertainment industry specialized in making us feel revolutionary, without us needing to actually change anything. Movies about heroes who face corporations are financed by corporations. Songs about freedom are distributed by multinational record labels. Books about critical thinking are published by conglomerates that profit from conformity. This display case rebellion has a clear objective: to function as an escape valve for real dissatisfaction. Instead of transforming revolt into concrete action, we channel our energy into consuming alternative products. We buy protest t-shirts, listen to critical music on Spotify, post revolutionary phrases on social networks. We feel rebellious, but our rebellion doesn't scare anyone. On the contrary, it moves the economy. The most perverse thing is that this false rebellion gives us the sensation that we've already done our part. I'm not alienated, I listen to independent music. I'm not consumerist, I buy from sustainable brands. I'm not conformist, I share criticisms of the system. This pseudo-contestation functions as a sedative for consciousness. It convinces us we're free when we're just buying a more stylized version of the same prison. We live in a society where everything needs to become public opinion, where every thought must be posted and every feeling shared. In this scenario, silence becomes a revolutionary act, not the silence of ignorance, but of contemplation, of resistance to constant noise, of the mind that still dares to exist away from the stage. There's immense power in thought that remains unshared, in the idea that stays only with you, in reflection that doesn't seek external validation. When you're capable of thinking without feeling the need to communicate, when you can reflect without seeking applause, you escape one of the most subtle forms of control: dependence on approval. The system needs you to expose everything, because everything that's exposed can be tracked, analyzed, influenced. Every post, every like, every comment feeds the algorithms of social control. But thoughts that stay only with you are free territory. They're sacred ground. No one has access to them, and therefore, real freedom still exists there. Historically, power has always looked with suspicion at those who spend too much time in silence. People who live with their own thoughts develop dangerous mental independence. They stop depending on group validation. They stop bowing to authorities. They begin to trust their intuition more than others' ideas. That's why our culture made silence unbearable. Music in elevators, screens in every corner, notifications all the time, pressure to always be connected, opining, engaged. Silence is seen as absence, as pathological loneliness, as a symptom of illness. But maybe the opposite is true. Maybe excess noise is the symptom of a mind that's afraid to be alone with itself. The inevitable question is, After perceiving the cage, is it possible to get out of it? After understanding how much we've been domesticated, can we rewild ourselves? The answer isn't easy. The programming we received was long, gradual, meticulous. Deprogramming requires the same: patience, courage, persistence. The first step is accepting discomfort. Leaving the mental comfort zone requires courage to question founding beliefs, examine habits that seemed natural, doubt truths that everyone accepts. This generates anxiety. After all, it's admitting that maybe you've lived years in automatic mode. Deprogramming yourself also means recognizing that you might be wrong about almost everything. Difficult, without a doubt, but liberating. Discovering that your political opinions might have been shaped by algorithms, that your personal tastes might have been created by marketing campaigns, that even your personality might have been partially programmed. It's a shock, but it's also the beginning of freedom. The path back to authenticity is solitary. There's no magic formula, no guru who can walk it for you. It's a personal, slow, and deep process. It can take years to unlearn everything that was put inside you, but it's worth every step. Maybe the most important question isn't, is it possible to live outside the herd? Maybe the real question is it possible to maintain within us a space that remains free, a core of authenticity that resists external pressures? Can we, at least a few times a day, think with our own heads? Say, I don't know, when we really don't know. I don't agree when we disagree. I need to reflect when something isn't clear. If we can do this, even if just for moments, we're already breaking with the programming. The invisible cage is real, but it's not unbreakable. It sustains itself because few realize they're trapped. And among those who realize it, many prefer the comfort of prison to the uncertainty of freedom. But there will always be those who question, doubt, think, and these open cracks through which others can pass. Returning to authenticity isn't easy nor fast, but it's possible. It begins with small gestures, questioning an idea that everyone accepts without thinking, spending a whole day without social networks, reading something that challenges your beliefs, sitting in silence while the world screams. Each act like this is a small victory of your consciousness over programming. The true revolution doesn't happen in the streets, nor at the ballot box. It happens inside the mind of each person who decides to stop outsourcing their thinking. It's invisible, silent, but transformative. When you recover the right to think for yourself, you don't just free yourself. You become living proof that freedom is still possible, even in a world that does everything to convince you otherwise.